Hello and welcome to our webinar, Insider Tips, Buying, Building, Renovating, and Relocating Your Practice, sponsored by Cirrus Consulting Group and Veterinarians. My name is Emily Blanton and I'll be your host today. Today is Thursday, August 15th, and if you're watching this webinar live, you have the opportunity to earn 1 continuing education credit. A survey will launch as soon as you exit the webinar that will allow you to indicate that you want to receive the CE credit. Please give us 10 business days to process and email your certificate to you. A recording of this webinar will also be available on the Veterinarians website and Cirrus Consulting Group's YouTube channel. Please remember, if you are watching the recorded webinar at a later date, you are not eligible for CEs. Throughout the webinar, be sure to type your questions into the questions pane of your GoToWebinar panel. You will have some time at the end for questions and answers. We will not be identifying the person who asked the question to ensure complete confidentiality. If you do not feel comfortable asking a question on the call, we will be providing contact information so you can reach out to the presenters directly. I'm very excited to introduce today's presenters, Eric Pook and Jay Welton. Eric manages the healthcare leasing team at Cirrus Consulting Group, a commercial real estate and lease negotiation firm servicing veterinarians. Eric has been consulting small businesses since the late 90s with an emphasis on revenue creation and cost mitigation. He grew up in a medical entrepreneurial environment and continued that passion by starting or growing businesses throughout North America. Eric advises doctors each day on how to successfully leverage the veterinary office lease agreement to maximize practice value while reducing risk and liability. Jay is an equipment and solutions manager at Veterinarians, a company dedicated to advancing the world of veterinary medicine and empowering veterinary healthcare teams. He works with veterinarians and practice owners to incorporate the best solutions and equipment for their unique businesses. Jay has successfully advised thousands of customer projects over his 17 years of experience. Before we begin, we are going to launch a brief poll asking you to describe your current situation. Go ahead and answer the poll now. If none of the poll responses apply to you, an answer isn't required. You should be seeing that poll on your screen now if it hasn't showed up already. Great. It looks like we've received all of the responses that we will be getting in, and it looks like the majority of our attendees today are building or buying their first practice. So Eric and Jay, we are ready for your presentation. Eric, I will turn it over to you to go ahead and kick us off.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Emily. A pleasure to be on today and with all of you as well. We've got a lot of great information here to cover and looking forward to, certainly looking forward to sharing some great tips and tricks as we went through the process. As soon as the poll is moved forward, we'll dig into some of the project tips that we're going to touch on today. Thank you, Emily. So from that perspective, we've got lots of great components to cover. And again, couldn't be more excited to be sharing the mic today with Jay Welton with 17 years worth of experience. What we've heard from both of us and our two firms over the past few decades are these main questions. And we really want to focus just on these top 3 today to make sure that we're getting a lot of great information as efficiently to you as possible. So these are really some great insider tips and tricks to help make sure that this new venture that you're about to walk down, or renovation or upgrade or expansion, or even a renewal of the lease or otherwise, is aligned to what can help. So first and foremost, tip number 1 on the screen is building your team. Who can you trust? If you've already built out a clinic before and you've already done this, then you know the value of having a team that knows how to fly their slot, how to work together to ensure it just gets done, and how there's not any finger pointing. So we're going to touch on who you need on the team. We've got some great resources and checklists that can be very, very helpful for those that request them. And then also digging into some tangible tips about should I buy or lease. I can't tell you how many conversations I've had personally about should I buy or should I lease in terms of the real estate component, as well as Jay over the years much the similar type questions when it comes down to equipment. And then last but not least, the main tip here is the total cost of ownership. We keep coming back to this about talking about when we're making these type of decisions, it's so easy to get emotional, enthusiastic, energetic about the location, getting started, and just wanting to go and buy. And as soon as you start the process, you'll find that everybody starts coming after you with all sorts of things to buy. So how do we make sure that we, hold back our emotional side and make sure that the logic and scientific side, and we're calculating the total cost of the lease, for example, or how much of an opportunity cost when looking if we're buying a building, let alone the equipment. So those are the top three today that we're excited to touch on. Quick high-level overview about ourselves, if you haven't heard us before. We are the only firm of our kind in North America that is a healthcare and veterinarian specialized tenant representation firm. So what does that mean? That means that every day we are reaching out to doctors throughout North America to help them in the negotiations or renegotiations of their commercial real estate contracts, primarily the lease agreements. So we have now been doing this for 25 years. So we've been supporting the veterinary community for decades, and we've done over 12,000 successful negotiations. So there's really no other one that has the breadth of experience or the amount of ability to negotiate the best possible deal for you. So we're going to share some of those tips and tidbits. We've been, representing thousands and thousands of practitioners over the years, right? We review approximately a few thousand every year, and we're involved with a lot of these continuing education courses. So ultimately, we can certainly help to ensure that for anyone with questions about rental rates, right? Or am I paying fair market or equitable market rates? Or if they've never had a lease professionally reviewed, that is certainly what we continue to do for the veterinarian community. And Jay, a little bit about Covetrus.
Thank you, Eric. And I'd like to say as well, welcome and thank you for investing your time with us on this call today. Covetrus is focused on being a vet-centric company that offers opportunities for the smallest as well as the largest veterinary organizations that are out there. The items and the things that they put into place, they have dedicated, whether it's their teams or their resources, and the goal is to keep the owner or the doctor free and unencumbered so that you have what you need to strategically delegate and to be able to focus on your plans and to meet and develop your mission or vision. It's to free you up to be able to accomplish what you want to do. The very first point, we're dedicated to advancing the world of veterinary medicine and empowering veterinary teams. Now, we don't have an arrogance that thinks that we are smart enough to advance the medical side of things, but we do believe that we are connected with teams that can bring about technology, tools, and resources that will help you be as competitive and be able to grow as aggressively as you may want to or as you may need to. We have other points there that you can read as we go through. I won't read them to you, but I want to focus on the second to the last. We focus our teams to build strong relationships and serve as trusted advisors to the veterinarians and your staff, so that you can take advantage of different multifaceted solutions that'll fit your needs. We love this graphic here that Eric gave us, just forwarded to. This gives you every component we believe that will touch your business or your practice. And they are not listed by priority, but they are listed because each one of those components affects you. So the reason why we love to partner with Cirrus is because we want partners that can empower you to make the best decisions for your practice in each one of those components. And one that often gets overlooked is facilities management. However, it's the foundation of getting started, because if you don't have the right lease or you don't have the right purchase on the very ground you're going to be on, that can affect the profitability margins and the effectiveness with which you can grow your business in the future. So today, we're going to move on to slide number 6, please. And we're going to move right into our first tip, which is building a professional team. Now, I've been blessed over the last 17 years to be able to work in 3 major sectors. I launched a business solutions for a national credit union, which gave me the ability to evaluate hundreds of business plans and determine lending potential and determine what things that they would need from a financial standpoint to be successful. From there, I went on to software and overseeing as director of business development, a software company, and their main focus was e-commerce and online stores. So I went from brick and mortar evaluation of business development to online digital evaluation of business development. And I'm in my 7th year now in the vet industry, working on business development as well. So it's not just selling equipment, but it is business development on the overall new build and how you grow your business through your equipment purchases as well as everything else. And what I have learned in all those sectors is there are some universal business principles. And one of those is building a professional team that you can trust. Moving on to 7. So I'm just going to address the first point, and I'm going to ask Eric to help me on this slide. But your suppliers and your equipment providers, you want them to be able to establish project advisors and supply equipment recommendations based on your needs, not based on what most benefits their organization. But do they have everything that they need to best facilitate your build? Eric, could you please?
Of course. So, perfect perspective, right? Nobody knows better than Jay about how important seeing thousands and thousands of exactly what you're about to go through to ensure that you've got the right team, because you are fantastic doctors, right? You are incredibly skilled, you provide incredible care, and what becomes important at this point is there's 2 paths. You want to do a lot on your own, you want to be cost conscious, but at the same time, you're going to need a team to facilitate many of the specifics. That'll be contracts, financials, etc. And especially if this is your first one, it's critically important that you find the team that in essence can pay for themselves. So what do I mean by that? You want to be aware of a few things. One is following the money, right? Meaning, how are they paid? How are they remunerated? And where are their interests? Are they looking for your the interests of the practice over the long term, or are they there just to sell you and get on to the next? So a couple of the first ones, when we talk about the team, in many cases, right, you're out, you're driving around, you're excited, you're looking for a specific area, you've been an associate for a few years, and now you want to branch out into being an entrepreneur and starting your first business. So what do? We jump in the car, we drive around on the weekends, we look at 4 lease signs, and we say, hey, this looks interesting. I wonder how much they cost or what they're asking for in rents. And we pick up the phone, we reach out to the landlord, and instantly we start a relationship with that broker. So we may have a broker ourselves, we may not. The conversations can continue. And that broker, the landlord's broker, might even also be the one that is now, quote unquote, representing you, right? And then negotiating with you or for you. So don't forget the agent. Let it be if they're representing you or they're representing the landlord or both, right? They are all paid by the landlord. Now, it's very important from that perspective to realize that the more that you pay in rents, the more they make in commission. So there's an inherent conflict that it's important to realize. That's always been part of the industry, and we work with brokers throughout the country, and they do an invaluable service to help with some of the location searches. But it's important to know, again, as they're very clear with motivations as well as how they're remunerated. So it's not free. That does get built into your rents. The value of the lease negotiator, such as Cirrus, is we're not brokers. We don't charge the landlords any commissions. We're not remunerated at all. There's no kickbacks or any of that sort of nature. We're purely paid by our veterinarians to represent their best interests. And we're the first to say, doctors, this is not a good location. You need to walk or run, not walk away. So we get involved with helping with the location searches, looking through some basic demographics, some professional rental rate reports, etc., to make sure that what we want to see of what we've negotiated in the area, to make sure that both the financials as well as the business and legal clauses are properly set up for you. So that gets involved with submitting the very first letter of intent. And without getting too much into that today, very important that you don't sign anything without making sure you have professional representation. And our team of commercial real estate attorneys and former real estate brokers, and even those that used to work for the national landlords negotiating against vets, we've hired on board over the past 25 years to help make sure that, again, we know all the insider tips and we're protecting you right from that LOI through the full lease agreement. Well, for those taking notes, don't sign a binding letter of intent. Always make sure that that initial offer is not binding. And in some cases, I had a call from a vet in the South who unfortunately signed a binding offer, agreed to taking over the space before they even had the lease agreement. So from that perspective, you've got your accountants on the CPA, very helpful for determining the corporate structure, right? And if you own your building, to separate your building from your professional corporation. Lawyers, very helpful for some of those incorporations, always an opportunity to review wills and estates, articles of incorp, right? And if you're acquiring a practice, providing the purchase and sale agreement negotiations as well. Designer and architect, of course, very important to capitalize and capture the vision you have for your new vet clinic and making sure that it turns into a reality without significant surprises. And they are then your gatekeeper to the contractors who are responsible for permits, zoning, and making sure that the architect's key design turns into reality with minimal issues. And that flows all the way back to the lease agreement to make sure that the landlord is clear the type of plumbing and electrical requirements necessary for your vet clinic. And last but not least, the financial institutions. So we have some of the members of our extended partnerships at Bank of America on the line with us today, as well as others, to help make sure that, again, before you get too far aligned and get all excited on a property, help make sure you're pre-approved so we can provide some great local introductions to your local resources at Bank of America. Very important you've got that term sheet and beyond. So this, in the essence of time, is a resource that we've created over the past 25 years to help clearly lay out who's responsible for what. What responsibilities do you have as the doctor, lease negotiator, broker, equipment provider, general contractor, architect, designer, etc. So obviously I've just done this as a quick summary, not to read, but for any of those interested or in that process, there'll be a quick poll at the end, or reach out to me directly. Happy to send you on a copy of this interactive PDF, because it goes through literally right from building your team, site selection, lease negotiation, pre-inspections of the space, zoning, insurance, to the construction process, which will be incredibly, can be a headache at times, right? As well as how and when to have the right equipment providers, right, with the Covetrus team, and also notice period constructions and beyond. So there's lots and lots to do. This really helps to give you a bit of a runway. So really, to summarize here, Jay, do you want to touch on some of the top two?
Be happy to. Thanks, Eric. So I know we're going to keep this moving really fast since we're putting it all in an hour, but just to review with you on the follow the money and motivation, different business models have different functions, right? And just like your practice is going to have a business plan and a model, so too do all the vendors that you will interact with. And they all have their form and function, and it doesn't make them good or bad what their form or function is, but we do need to make sure that it lines up with your business plan and your business model, because another good plan from a vendor could affect your good business model if it's not the right fit. So one way to look at it is, do the vendors and the other people you're working with have a holistic approach, or do they have a niche approach? Are you working with somebody that can help you in all areas, or is it just a niche? Once you've analyzed that and you've determined the breadth of which this vendor can help you, then look at how they're making their money. Do they make their money if you grow your business, or do they make their money even if you don't grow your business? And that's how you can analyze how much you want to trust them until you get to know them. If their business continues on, even if yours doesn't, then you may want to take their comments with a little bit more of a grain of salt. If their business has to see you succeed so that they can continue, then typically they're going to share with you things that are beneficial for you that they've learned in the industry. So evaluate, and that's how we follow the money and the motivation. Then leverage your referrals of established teams. So you have great referrals from classmates and from coworkers and people you meet when you go to trade shows that are other doctors. That's a great network to develop. You'll also have trusted vendors that you can talk with. And one way to look at a trusted vendor is consider brokerages, for instance. You've got brokerages that will be very clear and direct with you on how they're going to help you with purchasing or acquiring property, and they'll have upfront costs, and you know what you pay. There are other brokerages, as Eric alluded to earlier, that actually make more depending on what lease you sign or what agreement you get into. So you just want to know who you're working with. And once you establish who you're working with, you'll know your trusted vendors and you'll develop those relationships as you go. One thing that I love, and I'm going to plug my company, even though it's not a point here, is they had the vision to establish my position in a way that I don't get paid based on what you buy. So when I consult for you on what you're getting in the practice, it doesn't matter to me what you acquire. What matters to me is if that solution is going to fit for you. And again, I won't allude to this the whole presentation, but that's also why we ourselves with Cirrus, because their business model is the same way. They've got that flat upfront fee, and then they take care of everything else, and you know what you're in for, and you know what you're going to be taken care of. So in all of your evaluations, make sure you know what the mission and vision is of the company you're working with, and follow the money and leverage your referrals from established teams. Thanks, Eric.
Perfect. So exactly that. The last 2 points, you've heard it, but don't rush it. Give yourself sufficient time. Time is leverage, time is money, and anytime you're feeling rushed, and pushed to close or otherwise, take a deep breath and realize that it is a long-term commitment, and that if you're not getting the best possible deal, right, so many bad deals get done through quick and rushed decisions. And use your team and trust your team and establish your team as early as possible, and look to resources like Veterinarians or Cirrus as a bit of a quarterback to help walk you through this. So, next but not least, when we talk about professional tip number 2, should I buy or should I lease if I had a nickel for every time? So here's a quick high-level overview when looking at it from that perspective is when we're looking to buy, so let's take a step back. We're now looking at a new venture, new point, or a new practice that we're looking to build out. Right? Should I buy or should I lease? Well, there's a bunch of things to consider. First and foremost, commercial is 100% different than residential. Depending on where you are throughout the globe and the country and the continent, there can be advantages and disadvantages for each. Typically, especially in some of the coastal major areas, right, or urban areas, the buying is at a great premium, right, and also can come with a significant amount of risk, etc. But depending on your situation, could be advantageous. So first and foremost, be cautious about how much upfront capital there is, right? The profitability of a veterinarian practice is far greater than a typical return or cap rates on becoming a landlord. So when you buy a property, especially if it's multiple tenants, you are now a landlord. And if things go wrong, if there's an issue with the building or otherwise, that now becomes your problem. And people walk up into your clinic, as happened to one of our clients not long ago, and said, hey, the toilet's broken, can you guys fix it, right, in front of all their patients in the waiting room. It can be nice when you sell for earning some extra rental income, and it can be nice to pay yourself the rental income, right? And they can also give you some flexibility as to how you use the space or what changes you want for the space, right? However, when looking at the leasing components, the reason why most clinics choose this process is for a few reasons. One is the ability to gain access to great high-quality foot traffic. And if you're able to get into a strip mall or into a high-trafficked area, rarely do you have the opportunity to buy some of those locations. So it's a much smaller upfront payment, and therefore gives you more working capital to build or even expand into a new location, right? And then gives that flexibility that if there are to make changes, you can expand when you need to or make changes when you need to. So look, you're about to start a brand new business or a new location. You want to be very, very cautious. And if you're putting every penny you have into both the real estate and then the practice, you might be leaving yourself very flat-footed that if things don't work out, heaven forbid, you've now put yourself and your family in a very precarious situation. So ultimately, regardless of what happens with both, the lease, let it be if you own or you are leasing that space, you do need a lease to help separate those two. Why? If I own, what the heck do I need my lease for? So there's a number of components here that are most important. So let's say you do own your space today. Very important that you have a lease. So there's a liability perspective. What happens if something happens inside the space? Let's say someone slips and falls in the wintertime. Who's responsible? The lease will help to clarify the responsibilities between your professional corporation that owns the building, right, from your corporation that owns the practice. Also, it helps for the building value. If you have a rock-solid lease in place, when it comes to selling the building, you now have a rent roll, you now have historical rents, and it's clearly delineated. So many veterinarians I speak to day to day own their building, and they haven't separated it. So ask yourself, how do I, what credit card do I use? Do I use the same one to fix the faucet as I do to buy new supplies for the clinic? And then if that's the case, then we definitely should start to have a conversation with your accountant, because there is a lot of issues and challenges, and you might be missing out on some good financial benefits. The practice sale. So let's say you want to sell your animal hospital at some point in the foreseeable future. If you have not separated the books, if you haven't separated who's responsible for what in terms of payments, and you haven't established fair and equitable market rent, you're now going to be taking on a significant amount of decreased value, because it's going to become very, very difficult to assess the value of that. Also, tax exposure, you want to touch base with your CPA on, flexibility we mentioned, as well as really protecting your estate. Let's say you and a family member, a cousin or otherwise own the building together, right? But you own 100% of your animal hospital. If that's the case, heaven forbid, if you pass away, we've now created a perfect storm for our family issues. So make sure that there's a lease that clearly covers what happens, heaven forbid, if you pass or unable to continue to work with your patients today. In addition to that, then, Jay, you want to touch base on the equipment side and buying and leasing?
Thanks, Eric. When you consider purchasing or leasing a property, you want to make sure, first of all, when you're laying out your equipment, that you work from inside out. Basically, from your business model, is this a piece of equipment or is it a secondary service? In the event that constrained budgets, you want to know what your core pieces are. You want to have those laid out, and that's something that someone on your team can help with. But you want to know what those core pieces are and then what the secondary pieces are. Another thing to consider with that is that you make sure that warranties, and we'll go over this more later, warranties, installation thing is included with those. The next point is cash is king, and your cash flow is vital. So when you purchase a piece of equipment or you're going to buy your clinic, you have more freedom in a that you purchase outright or that you build. You'll have more freedom to make adjustments as you go if you need to. You can add or subtract equipment. If there's a really deal at a trade show and you think the floor lays when you open and then you found out you're good, those type of things, you can make those adjustments on the fly. When you're leasing property, though, and this is where you use someone like Cirrus Consulting, you want to make sure that you're allowed to make those adjustments and include new pieces of equipment, and it won't affect you from a cost perspective. It's important to make sure that you remember your layout and cash, all the cash that you have, that you protect when you're buying, and you consider leasing equipment when it fits your business model, and you equip that you can right up front out of the gate so that you have a lower operating budget to start with. Contracts are good. Sometimes contracts will get you free equipment, but they will also restrict you, because a lot of companies that offer those want you to give them your business for a certain amount of time. Now, we offer those as well, but I don't like them because this is a very, very competitive market right now for the veterinarian industry. And new things are coming online and things are coming up, and you have the opportunity to grow your business. But if you're locked into a contract for 3 or 5 or 6 years, then you won't have the ability to make a change if it would benefit you. So if your business plan matches up with the contracts that sign, that works, that's a great thing to lease the equipment or have it given to you as a contract. If they don't match your plan, then you want to go ahead and buy it up front. And lastly, remember, the plan that I keep referring to comes to buying and leasing equipment, it comes to every decision you have to make in your clinic, your plan's fluid. Just make sure you have them laid so that you have a source and a foundation to work back to. But allow it to change as you go so that you can continue to grow your business in the best possible way. And I think we'll just go over the first takeaway. If you want me to, Eric, I'll have those, and then you want to.
You're just cutting in and out just a tiny bit, Jay. So happy to run through this. So from that perspective, as Jay was mentioning, most importantly, cash is king. So make sure that you're looking at both options, looking at, as we'll touch on shortly, the total cost of ownership. Next is flexibility really is valuable to make sure that, let it be buying or leasing, especially if you're not committing to all those upfront costs of buying a building, that can be very helpful for you. Of course, know what happened when things go wrong, right? Establishing a specific contract separating the two will help to protect you from start to finish. Also, from that perspective, right, when and if you do purchase, right, how do I set myself up properly? So those are just a couple of those core key takeaways. So from that perspective, now let's look towards tip number 3, as we want to make sure we have some good sections for Q&A. So now we're talking about total cost of ownership, my favorite, because one of the first things we do when talking to the new clinician is asking about, have we looked at what we're about to walk down? Have we looked at, have we created a business plan? Have we created a cash flow analysis? Do we know how much we're going to be spending over the next 5, 10, 15, 20 years, especially as it pertains to the lease, to the mortgage, or otherwise? It's critically important that we've protected ourselves from start to finish, and we're aware of that. So from that perspective, Jay, let's touch on the total cost on equipment ownership.
Thank you, Eric. And I had been cutting in and out. They texted me, so I'm going to watch for a text. I may have Eric just take over if I'm not coming through clearly. But on total cost of ownership, the big thing is vendors are very good at marketing. Do not get distracted from the up. Consider all of your expenses, both total ownership. So it's your cost of support. What do they do ongoing? Are there support contracts? Repairs, do they include labor parts, or is it only labor, and for how long? Cost to upgrade your system. What does it cost, or what the cost if you want to upgrade in 5 or 10 years? Because companies have different reputations for what it costs to upgrade, and when you get to a point where you do upgrade systems in 5, 10, 15 years after you have the practice, if you switch to a different vendor down there, the cost of learning curve, that point, if you switch to a different vendor, you do have a learning curve, and you consider what the training time will cost you in practice, because typically you have to go down for an hour or several hours. So the cost of upgrade is, are you aligning with something you're comfortable with for the first 5, 10, 15 years? And then is that something that looks like this company is going to be there, have been, or is it a startup and you're not sure you're going to be there? So consider the cost of upgrade. Ever get the cost of consumables? What does it cost? Not just if you're diagnostics lab and the consumables of the test, but what are the other incidental little items that you might have, even if it's not a diagnostic lab? And on those consumables, what does that cost? Is that something you can buy, or you have to buy through the company? More expensive. We talked about this on cost of equipment earlier. We talked about contracts, and just to review, a contract is a loan against your flexibility in this ever-changing market. So make sure that the contract matches your business plan, or it carries a cost to you. So you want to consider that. Is the equipment that you're purchasing durable? And we're going to leverage our relationships with those people and those vendors we trust to determine the durability of equipment, and what's the cost to replace it in the future. So those are the main key items when you're looking at total cost of ownership for equipment and all of the items that go into your practice. So don't get distracted by price, and don't get distracted by free, but go for cost of ownership on these overall components. Eric?
Great. Thanks, Jay. So let's touch on the total cost of ownership as it pertains to real estate. So as it pertains to the space, we ask this question. We ask this question across all of our CE courses we do throughout North America when we ask about what is a lease. So let's pose that, right? I know we don't have the questions section open here. You might be able to tap on some additional questions here on the right-hand column. But what is a lease? What does it mean to you? Well, we hear a lot of things. It's a contract. It's a commitment. It's a cost, right? However, what's missed 9 times out of 10 is understanding that underneath it all, it represents this, a check. And arguably the largest check that you will send to a specific individual, group, or provider in your professional or personal careers. So what's so ironic is that when we look at the lease and we look at negotiating the lease, we just start thinking about those handful of things: base rent, annual increases, and unfortunately, maybe a couple of months of free rent, and that's all we look at. We don't look at the total occupancy cost over the term. We don't look at how much it is over a yearly basis, or 5 years, or 10 years, or 20 years. So from that perspective, it's a major commitment. And it's important that before you sign that, letter of intent or lease on the trunk of a broker's car, that you make sure that you know what's in there, and don't be fooled. Don't just take and focus your negotiations on the first half page of the 40-page lease agreement, because the landlord's attorneys have done a great job in helping to make sure that their entire lease is well designed to protect them financially. And it should be vet-specific language to meet the needs of you and your clinic from now or the next 20 years. It either provides a rock-solid concrete foundation to build your practice upon, or a crumbling foundation, which can cost far more to oversee this perspective, right, and fix later on. So let's dig in. So this is a fantastic takeaway from today. Here are all the major financial components that we negotiate on each and every new animal hospital lease. So let's touch on each one at a high level. First of all, base rent goes without saying. Make sure you know the data sources and all the comparable sources across the board. Number 2, annual increase. Let's make sure we look at what those annual increases are. On average, we see about 3% or linked to the Consumer Price Index. In addition, there's things called TMI. Who's responsible for it? What type of lease is it? Is it a triple net lease? Is it a gross lease? Is it a modified lease? Right? Those can also be negotiated in terms of who's responsible for the building expenses, property taxes, common area maintenance, insurance. All of these elements, depending on the type of lease, right, are extra financial components to be aware of, right? And depending on, especially CAMs, negotiable. Also, tenant improvement allowance, or TIA. That is money that the landlord provides you at a price per square foot basis to help build out your new animal hospital. So that can be a variety of things, but be cautious, right? Again, it's not free money. If the landlord's ponying up $30,000, $40,000, $50,000, $60,000, that's coming from somewhere. And you guessed it, that's coming from your lease rate. So you want to be able to look at each of these as an individual valve, and how can you maximize the value of each valve. In addition to that, free rent, we should always be looking at, for a new practice, again, for those taking notes, a 10-year term with 2 5-year options. You want to maximize your continuity and predictability of your practice, and that's critically important. In addition to that, free rent. You should be able to ask for 1, 2, or 3 or more months where you're not responsible for paying that base rent. That's in addition to the fixturing period. So as you're building out your new clinic, very reasonable for asking for 3, 4, 5, many cases we're able to get upwards of 6 months by making sure that you are not paying base rent while you're building out your space. That can be huge from a cash flow perspective. So watch your pennies. And again, by helping to leverage a professional negotiator, again, it's an element that really does pay for itself, right, through any of these components. And last but not least, landlord work. What can they do to help build out certain elements of their space, considering they own it? Every dollar that you're spending to improve the space and build it out or acquire it, right, you're paying for. You should make sure that the landlord is doing certain things for you that might be far more cost effective for them to build out a wheelchair accessible bathroom than it is for you and your contractors. In addition, and again, in the essence of time, here are just a small cross sections of some of the legal components that you want to be aware of in terms of protecting yourself, protecting the liabilities that you're responsible for within the lease, and if nothing else, you need to be aware of what your rights and obligations are with this. So from that perspective, if you have any questions or if you're not aware of what this means in yours, for an appreciation for all those on the call, we do a complimentary lease review. So by submitting us a copy of your lease, we're able to go through these and other components of the lease to review what risks there might be in that new or especially your existing clinic. Or if you're looking to expand, you need to make sure that right from the original letter of intent, you're clear as to what language you need to have, and you need to make sure that that's drafted with someone that is purely having your best interests in mind. I'm sure we'll have some pieces for Q&A there. So as we wrap up here, very important when we look at the tenant lease cycle, time is money, time is leverage. Critically important that we protect ourselves from start to finish, and time is to your side. So what I would strongly suggest here, first and foremost, is 24 months. This slide and information came from the landlords. When they go to CE courses like this to learn how to negotiate against their tenants, this is what they're taught, that the worst time for them to start negotiations is 24 months out. Why? Because that gives you the option to pick up and relocate. It can be upwards of 18 months now to pick up and relocate an animal hospital, to finding, zoning, build-outs, constructions, delays. So if this has ever happened to you, your landlord then stalls or says, no, we're not engaging this until much closer to the expiry. And then 12 months out, you reach out. They're golfing, they're on vacation. Oh, it's the summer, we're not looking at it. Then 8 months later, now it's the holidays, right? Now you're getting to the end of your lease term, and you're trying desperately to renew your lease and exercise your options. Very, very, very often landlords run this play, and unfortunately it's all to make sure that you end up having less leverage, and by waiting to the last minute, they know you have no choice other than to sign at whatever rates that come through. You're not in a strong point of leverage. So please, if you're in a lease agreement today, if you're coming up within the next 24 months, definitely give us and reach out to us to help understand what could be possible in your upcoming renewal. Very similar for if you're doing a new start or expanding, reaching out as early as possible. And even if you're midterm and you're looking to expand your practice, perfect time to leverage. Any time that you represent extra dollars to the landlord, you want to exploit that to your benefit as much as possible. And really from that perspective, as we close on this total cost of ownership, here's what we've learned over 20 years. First and foremost, don't fall down the trap of doing the wrong thing by reaching out to the landlord directly. If you reach out to the landlord directly, that can be very negative. You want to call that number on the sign. You want to, just have a quick conversation with your landlord to see what they want to propose. Never wait for them to propose to you. You should always be setting what the fair and equitable market rents should be and what you want in your renewal or in the new start, because it's your business, right? It's not theirs. So get all your information. Get all the proprietary data, get all the real estate analytics, right? Reach out to me to get some of the building reports for those on the line, right? Get all that information. Then identify your goals. What's your business plan? Describe the experience for your patients, right? Help to understand. Then number 3, reviewing the lease. Have it professionally reviewed by Cirrus or otherwise. Make sure that you know what you're getting into. Prepare with market research. as a core component to know what the vacancies are, what the average rental rates have changed, what other negotiations have done in the area. We have access to incredible proprietary data throughout the continent. And then, again, develop a strategy. It's a carefully choreographed game of chess. So often, new vets reach out to the landlord and say, okay, what are we asking for rents? I want 10% less, and jump right in. Right? You want to know exactly all the way through eventual transitioning, because that's what the lease governs. So please make sure to minimize your 25 years. On average, vet clinics are upwards of 26 years on average that the vet is in that space. So very important that we've protected ourselves from that perspective. But look what's happened. We've now gone through 5 steps, and what have we not done? We've yet to pick up the phone and call the landlord. So please, as there's one main takeaway to help protect your total cost of ownership is be strategic. Get your partner, get your team aligned, and don't pick up the phone and engage in any sort of negotiations or anything beyond information gathering without making sure that you've got a game plan and you've got a team that's helping to guide you to minimize this. Because heck, even being able to reduce the annual increase by 0.5% can save you tens of thousands of dollars over the term. And on average, not uncommon to see, many vet clinics that we work with are spending over the next 10 to 20 years upwards of $1 million of commitment. So for those of you that have already, right, signed a mortgage or lease, when you've looked at it, right, if you only knew that you would be spending over $1 million worth of checks and money, would you have tried to negotiate things a little differently? And if the answer is yes, then use that as the wake-up call to help make sure that you're protected. Then negotiate financials first, then go through all the amending clauses, and then get to a final form lease agreement that you exercise. And always make sure you get a signed copy back. Whew, lots of great information. I wanted to, again, give some good time for Q&A, but from that perspective, maybe just to touch on these top few. Number one is negotiate. In life, you don't get what you deserve, you get what you negotiate for. And yes, you are an incredibly valued tenant. The second you start to walk away, the second you start to change, the second you start to in essence, play the game skillfully, you will be amazed at what you can get. Landlords are great about saying, oh, you know what, I've got a list of other people that want to take over the space. You better sign up right now or else, right? No, on average, many clinics stay on the market for upwards of 9 to 12 months. You have time. Don't get emotional. Don't sign a bad deal purely because you're getting pressured by someone who's, right, purely commission driven. Be proactive. Don't wait and don't do things at the last minute. If it feels like a rush or pressure decision, take a deep breath, right, and make sure you know what you're getting into. There's always another option, and there's always a way to still make sure we can get that perfect location, right? But again, if it seems too good to be true, it probably is. Jay, if you've got it, how about touching on some of your top 3 here?
Thanks, Eric. And just to piggyback a little bit on the proactive, when you're in a position to purchase equipment for your hospital, if you feel pressure, the first thing you should do is slow down and wait. There is not a vendor in the United States that does not have the ability to offer and honor a deal, and they do not need to put you under the gun to sign a contract by tomorrow. That is a salesperson who's trying to make a quota to hit a bonus for that quarter. So always feel comfortable. The only exception to that rule is if it is a company that recertifies used equipment and they only have one and it's a first come first serve. So don't let you get yourself stuck in the pressure situation. Under considering all costs, we've talked in detail about what could be hidden or unintended, the cost that you sometimes miss when you're looking at the overall project. But there's another thing that touches overall costs. It's when you're building. Let's take oxygen, for example. If you're going to go concentrators, then you're not going to need drops for your oxygen. But if you want to do drops in your oxygen and you're going to go central throughout your hospital, you need to know when to order your oxygen plates, and then you need to know when those get tied in and installed with the plumbers, and what process in the building format, those go in. Otherwise, you could find yourself having to cut drywall away and spend a lot more additional expense connecting those later. So in the overall cost, it's not just those support, what is the warranty, but it's also the timing. And your team that you align to help you and consult with you will also help you address those issues. You certainly do not want to order a digital x-ray and have it show up before the walls are built, and now you're having to pay to put that in storage because it came in too soon. So when you consider overall cost, the practical things of construction, you want to consider as well. Contracts we went through, I think, very well. Contracts have to fit your business plan. And if contracts didn't work, the companies that offer them, they wouldn't still be in business. It doesn't mean they're evil. It just means that they fit certain business plans. But you will talk to friends and you will talk to other doctors who are very angry about signing a contract with a particular company. And it's because they didn't align it with they didn't understand the total overall cost of ownership. And that goes back to that team that you use to consult with and to get wise counsel. That helps you keep your cost of ownership down by on contracts and business plans. And then on reputation and references. I like to give this point to anybody we're working with. On references, don't just get them a year old or 2 years old, but ask for references that are 5 years old or older. Because a lot of companies can come on the market and offer opportunities to you, and then you can talk to people that have had it for 6 months or 8 months, and there's nothing wrong, and you checked 4 references and it was great, and then you get it and you're a year into it and you have all kinds of problems. So when you consider references that are provided on equipment and on contractors and on builders, make sure that those guys have references, at least 1 or 2 that are older than 5 years, so that you know that the customers made it through the honeymoon period and they're still holding up. And then use the reputations that they have. And something I also tell doctors when they're buying equipment, also trust your gut when you're talking to their representative, because their representative was hired by their HR department and they do in somewhat reflect the overall company. So make sure that you're considering the reputation and the references.
Fantastic. So, and then Jay, just so we give ourselves some good time to certainly touch base on some good questions. Do you just want to quickly touch base on some of your top key takeaways and summary for today?
Absolutely. Go down. I like to use the little term R&D, but it's research and duplicate. Take advantage of the internet. Most doctors that I talk with that are looking to build a new practice have already done this. But if you haven't, research, find out what other doctors are doing, try to find those all across the country who emulate or might be similar to the practice that you want to open. See what services they offer. Look and see what they offer, and gather as much information as you can. And that way it will save you time on building your business plan if you don't already have that. I always want you to remember who you're working with. Follow the money. Simply ask them how they get paid. There's nothing wrong with the salesperson that feeds his kids if he gets paid on commission. But you want to know that he's getting paid on commission with what you're buying so that you can understand whether or not he's pressuring you because it's in your best interest or if it's in the best interest of the salesperson. And lastly, I really want you guys to remember nothing's free. Even this webinar cost you an hour of your time, and we thank you for that investment, and we hope you find it worthwhile. But even this costs something. And obviously, we have presented information that we would love to work with you, so we take the risk that we might be able to work with you. So everyone is trying to grow their business together. Just make sure that those businesses you work with align with your mission and vision as well.
Perfect. And then lastly, in terms of the real estate and lease, first of all, as I said before, right, it's a major commitment and investment. Make sure you have the right representation and know what you need to know going into it. Assemble the team, follow the money, minimize your risk, maximize the financial, be strategic, right? Start your process as early as possible, and bottom line, don't do anything without doing your homework. So from that perspective to Jay's perspective and what he mentioned, right, is in appreciation your time. What we do is a complimentary review of your clinical lease. So if you have an LOI that you've been looking at, or one that you've had in the past, or you're contemplating expanding, or you have an existing lease, definitely want to take us up on this offer in appreciation for your time. So what is 3 hours worth of time doing the analysis? We do a full review, we pull up the real estate reports, and we schedule a 1 hour consultation with you. For all those in attendance on the line today, we're able to offer that complimentary in appreciation for it. Why? Because we know that a good majority of those, that once they're understanding what their rights and obligations are and how valuable it is to have someone purely representing their best interests and helping them save money, the vast majority will end up working with us in the future. So that's the why, back to Jay's point. From that perspective, again, my email is down below. In additional information to be able to request that complimentary lease review, I'll put that up one more time. It's just ebook at cirrusconsultinggroup.com. But I wanted to give ourselves some time now to Emily to touch base and open the floor for some questions.
Sure. Thank you, Eric and Jay. We do have a couple of questions to start off with, and if there are any additional questions in the next couple of minutes that any of the attendees want to type in the control panel, they're more than welcome to. So the first question we have is probably for you, Eric. It says, my lease isn't up for almost another 2 years, and I'm planning to stay in the same location. Can I still work with Cirrus on the complimentary lease review?
Yes, of course. Depending on if you have remaining options, when that option to renew deadline is, you might have to give notice of your request to stay in that space upwards of 12 months prior to that actual lease expiry. So, doctors, two dates you want to put in your iPhones and Androids today. First and foremost, what date does your lease expire? And what date do you have to give written notification to your landlord of your intent to stay? So from that perspective, very, very important that we, protect yourself based on knowing those dates. But of course, if you're beyond the 2 year term, still send us what you have today within your existing lease. We're happy to review and strategize. And you might, especially if you're looking to expand or if you're looking to put some money into the space to renovate, don't renew your lease before after you renovate, because if you put some money in now and then go to renew your lease, the biggest mistake vets make are they put $30,000, $40,000 into their space and then their lease comes due in a couple years. And then we want better rates. The landlord laughs at us by saying, you just put all this money in and now you want to negotiate a better rate? Why should I? You're pot committed. So if you're thinking of putting any money into the space, regardless of when your term is, definitely reach out, because that's valuable to the landlord. If you're going to renovate the reception area or otherwise, you're making their area look better. You shouldn't be, just spending all this money on the space and then try to renegotiate. You lose all your leverage. So yes, happy to assist in that case.
Thanks, Eric. Jay, this one looks like it's a little bit more geared towards you. So it says, you mentioned the relationship that Covettrus and Cirrus have with Bank of America on practice and project financing. Are there other, does Covettrus have other financial relationships that can help me with my project, like equipment financing and credit card processing?
That's a good question, and we do have an internal finance department that can help you with both of those. And we partner with Bank of America because they have a phenomenal new vet hospital. They're still the leader for veterinarian hospitals when it comes to business lending. But if for some reason you're not able to be approved, I have worked with Bank of America representatives that can refer us to other lending agencies, and then our internal lending department starts with Bank of America as well. But if for some reason you're not able to be approved through that program, then we can look at other options with you. So yes, we do have internal financing department, and you can reach out to project partners at Covettrus, and if you address it to Jay, it'll get right to me and I can help you get with those folks.
Thank you. And the final question is probably for the both of you. It sounds like this is coming from someone that is a veterinarian at an existing practice, but they're planning to open their own practice in the near future, and they wanted to know if there was a confidential way to get a hold of both Cirrus and Covetrus to start the conversations, as it would be a sensitive subject based on the position they're in today.
So for Cirrus, our territory managers live and breathe on being able to be trusted by their doctors, and we understand the potential volatility if that information gets out, because we have just so much experience in the industry with over 200 territory managers and all the experience they've had. So you can reach out. If you reach out to me directly at Jay Welton, and it's the same thing, j.welton@covetrus.com, then we can talk and find out where you're located, and I can get you in touch with the manager, and then it will stay between you and I and the manager, and they can give you information that way. But yeah, we are very, very protective of your information.
Great. In addition to that, of course, I mean, we've established an incredible reputation throughout the medical veterinarian community where confidentiality is key. Candidly, the majority of the new vets we get is, if you ask Siri, how do I negotiate and set up my veterinarian office, we come up as the number one. So we are and have been over the past 25 years, the trusted state to ensure that things are done incredibly confidentially. So we do things by not involving, of course, anything regarding the clinic. Our conversations, confidential, privacy is obviously a key component. So yes, to be very, very clear, absolutely anything that's reached out, we always deal in a one-to-one basis and is kept very, very strictly confident. So of course, the existing employer otherwise might not know. It's important, though, speaking of the employer, that you know if there's any restricted covenants in your employment agreement today that prevents you from opening an animal hospital within a 5 or 10 mile radius. Many vets unfortunately find out too late that there is one, and now it becomes a much bigger issue. So speaking of employers, if you are looking to make those changes, please make sure that you review your employment agreements for that restricted covenants.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Eric and Jay, for your expertise. And thanks to Covetrus and Cirrus Consulting Group for sponsoring today's webinar. And thanks again to everybody that participated as well. Remember, as soon as you exit the webinar, you will receive a survey. Go ahead and complete the survey so we can process your CEs. Keep in mind that you won't get your CE credits right away. It'll take up to 10 business days, and you will receive it in your email. Thanks again, and this concludes our presentation.